This is the Wheat Belly Guide to the use of natural sweeteners. But why even get into the world of natural sweeteners? Some people will ask why we do this at all. Well, a number of years ago, I learned this lesson the hard way. I asked patients to eat very cleanly. They'd eat only meats and fish and poultry and healthy oils like coconut and olive oil and vegetables and nuts. But then holidays would roll around, like Thanksgiving or Christmas or a birthday party or a family get together, and they'd come back 12, 14, 15 pounds heavier and be metabolic disasters because they indulge, say, in pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving or a slice of birthday cake at someone's birthday, maybe a son or a grandson's or granddaughter's birthday. They'd also have all the phenomena of re-exposure to grains as well. But they'd be metabolic disasters. Small LDL particles that cause heart disease would skyrocket, their triglycerides would go way up, their blood sugars would go back up, blood pressures would go back up, they'd regain weight, of course, all in visceral fat. And so every holiday for many people was accompanied by this explosion, this backtracking on progress that they'd made on this lifestyle. So I learned that I had to provide healthy or benign alternatives. So I started developing recipes and sharing them with my patients. This was in my practice years ago. And they'd come back after holidays having made, say, a safe pumpkin pie, or having a safe birthday cake, or having a wonderful big piece of cheesecake with nothing bad, nothing given up. No increase in weight, no explosion in blood sugar or small LDL particles, no rise in triglycerides. In other words, they enjoyed their holidays, their family get-togethers, their entertaining events with no health downside. So that's why I added these natural sweeteners. Now let's be clear, there are some sweeteners we do not use. Of course, no sugar, no fructose containing sweeteners like agave nectar, which is horrible, high fructose corn syrup, of course. We also don't use many of the sugar alcohols like sorbitol, mannitol, and maltitol, because in addition to causing extravagant gastrointestinal distress like gas, bloating, and diarrhea, they also raise blood sugar. They act just like sugar, so they're really no better. It's just another form of sugar, in effect. So there's just a handful of sweeteners we choose, but we also avoid the synthetic sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin, because those have recently been shown to cause extravagant changes in bowel flora composition, and it pushes your bowel flora composition towards that of diabetics. In other words, it cultivates diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and weight gain. So all those soft drinks and sugar-free foods made with those three synthetic sweeteners are no better than sugar, in many cases worse, because of their effects on bowel flora. So we're left with 5 natural sweeteners that so far have proven very benign. You don't see weight gain, you don't see a rise in insulin, you don't see a rise in blood sugar if some of them are used in the appropriate quantities. There are a couple that will raise blood sugar a little bit if you use a lot of them. We'll talk about that. My first choice is monk fruit, a natural a derivative of the monk fruit plant grown in Southeast Asia. It's very benign. It has a very clean taste. It tends not to have that bitter aftertaste. The downside is that it's so highly concentrated that most companies don't sell it as pure monk fruit. You can buy it that way, but you have to use almost minuscule amounts. So it's a little tricky to use because so little is required to match the sweetness of sugar. But most products, therefore, are combinations of monk fruit with some other sweeteners. Now, be careful what they mix them with. If it's mixed with maltodextrin, you don't want to buy that because that's sugar. If it's mixed with erythritol, one of our other 5 benign sweeteners, that's okay. So watch out what it's mixed with. So pure monk fruit or monk fruit mixed with another benign sweetener. Stevia, another excellent sweetener. The downside is that about half the people who use it get this bitter aftertaste. So it's usually better using it as one of the components in a mixture of sweeteners, all combined, for instance, monk fruit and stevia, or stevia and inulin, or stevia and erythritol. Very useful combinations that reduce the bitter aftertaste. Stevia is natural. It's not been associated with a rise in insulin, certainly not blood sugar nor weight gain. Some people prefer some of the variations on stevia, like stevia glycerite or Rebiana, which is an isolate, a fraction of stevia, and some people believe that it has less aftertaste for them. Inulin You may remember inulin as a prebiotic fiber that comes from root vegetables. It's not the best sweetener because it's kind of weak. It only has about 60-70% of the sweetness of sugar, but it has a wonderful prebiotic fiber effect. Downside, only use modest quantities. It's best not to use more than a teaspoon per any one serving, or else you might get excessive bloating or gas or diarrhea, certainly in the beginning when you haven't gotten full control of your bowel flora. So use it as a secondary or tertiary sweetener after other sweeteners when you make your sweetener combinations. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol, but it's the most benign sugar alcohol. When used in the modest quantities we use in our recipes, for instance, it almost never causes diarrhea, bloating, gas. It does in some people, in which case you may be exceptionally sensitive, but most people do not have that. It's a very clean tasting sweetness, only about 70% sweetness of sugar though. So if a recipe calls for, say, 1 tablespoon of sugar, you'll have to use about 1 1/3 tablespoons of erythritol to match that quantity of sweetness. Erythritol is a natural sugar found in small quantities in fruits like apples and pears, so it's a very benign sweetener. Xylitol is another natural sweetener. It's my least favorite. It is a sugar alcohol also, and can have the effects of sugar alcohol, gastrointestinal distress, etc., if you use a lot of it. Generally not if you use a small amount. But I put it on the list because it's the best at recreating some of the unique properties of sugar, such as glazing or sauces or jams. It's better in recreating some of the viscosity and glaze effects of sugar. So I use it last. If we're making a recipe that calls for a glaze, for instance, use your other benign sweeteners to sweeten the filling, the pie filling, say, but use the xylitol just for the glaze. Xylitol is toxic to dogs. Don't let your dog get a hold of any dish you make with xylitol. And use it as your last choice in sweeteners because it can act somewhat like sugar, maybe 1/3 to 1/2 as much of a rise in blood sugar compared to an equal quantity of sugar. Well, there you have it. Use these 5 sweeteners alone or in combination. Play with them. Get familiar with how they work. People sometimes ask, I should mention, what is the conversion? Well, a lot of these sweeteners don't have a fixed conversion, especially stevia, because each preparation is different. So start by looking at the package of the product you buy. If it says something like 1/8 of a teaspoon of our stevia equals a tablespoon of sugar, it'll give you a starting point. But recognize that all the products are different. With the exception of xylitol, which is a 1-to-1 conversion to sugar, and erythritol, which is about 70%, so about 1.3 times as much erythritol required as sugar. Beyond that, refer to the package and get familiar with either your own mixture that you come up with or the mixture you purchased in a fixed combination of various sweeteners. Get used to that combination, be comfortable with it, and you'll find that you can create some wonderful recipes. And always taste your mix or batter and adjust the sweetness. Recall that in the Wheat Belly lifestyle, your perception of sweetness will undergo a change over time, and you'll become more and more sensitive to sweetness, so that you need less and less and less. Maybe the first time you make a recipe, maybe you need 1/2 cup of your sweeteners, and then 3 months later, you only need 1/4 cup. So be aware that your taste will also change. But be assured that these sweeteners we've been using for the last several years and have not encountered any significant problems at all.